Hello, this is Michelle with Artful Possibilities. Thank you for joining me today for this acrylic painting tutorial. Today we'll be doing our winter snowman, which I call Michelle's snowman. In my studio in the past, this was one of the most popular Christmas snowman paintings for beginners. So I want to show you today how to paint this step by step. I'm going to be using acrylic paints, mostly Liquitex Basics acrylics. They come in a tube like this. I really like them. They have a great creamy consistency. They conform to the ASTM non-toxic, and so they're great. Soap and water cleanup. I really like them. I'm also using some other brands that I'm using up the colors on. So want to just tell you really quickly, I am using titanium white, ultramarine blue, Mars black, burnt umber. My red is actually a crimson Artist Loft that I'm using up, and I'm also using cadmium orange hue. Okay, and we're going to use those colors and we're going to create this little guy. So I'm going to move this original up out of the way, and we're going to start by using a circle that you have around the house. So this is a styrofoam plate. I'm not even sure how many inches this is. I hadn't measured it. But if you go right across, it's a 9-inch. But any size bowl or plate hanging around the house will work for this. So I'm going to invert it like this. And I want to leave enough room at the bottom for this little bit of jacket. So I'm going to take my pencil and I'm going to trace this plate. And I'm only going to go about just a little bit more than halfway up. Okay, so I'm going to start here. Whoops, I already slipped. And I'm going to go around like that. Okay. So the thing with using pencil, I could have used chalk, but it would have to be colored chalk, which can get messy sometimes. But pencil doesn't always erase well, so we're going to have to get our background color right up against the face, okay? So down here we're going to make 2 curved lines to create a neck or a scarf, okay? So right in through here we're going to create a brim. So what I want to do is come and stick out from the head on each side. Now, it's okay to make it a little bit angled. I think I'll do that on this one. So this part here we don't really need, but it's going to get covered up with paint, so you don't really have to worry about that. And then I'm going to just rest my hand here, and I'm going to make an arch that comes across, okay? So I'm just going to go, boom. Same thing here, I'm going to go up and around to that other side. So I just want to place my hand here. And I just want to, there, okay? Now, keep in mind, this can be adjusted with paint as we go. So now I want to create the top of the hat. So I'm going to bring this down, and I'm going to do the same thing. I'm just going to hold my hand and try to make a circle, or we could actually come in with the top half of the plate. So let's go ahead and try that. So you can see where the brim is on each side, and again this one's tipped a little bit. So I'm going to use my pencil and I'm just going to trace the top part of that plate. That works out pretty good. It's a little bit wider than the one I drew by hand. And because I've drawn this brim tipped a little bit, I'm going to put the pom-pom a little bit up to the left. So sometimes when you're drawing, and we're just drawing whimsical and simple beginner shapes, it's okay if you make adjustments like that as you go, okay? As far as the eyes and the carrot nose, I'm going to draw them on top of the white paint because they could smudge, or once you draw and then you have paint over the pencil, you can't erase the pencil then. So let's go ahead and get that painted in before we do it. All right, so here we go. I am going to be using an assortment of brushes today. I have a large flat, which I'm going to use for the background. I just dropped one, my small round. That's why I usually keep those tucked up over my ear. I have a small round like this that I'm going to use for the eyes later. I have a scruffy kid's brush, which I'm going to use for the fur. A smaller flat, a pointed round, and then I have another round, which is really an older round that's a little more worn out. It happens to be wet. We're going to use that for the snow in the end. The one thing that I'm going to change from the original, and I'll show that one to you again. The one thing that I'm going to change from this one is that I'm not going to make these super large polka dots. Okay. Once I painted the original, I thought it kind of gave them more of a clown look, so I don't want to have those on this one. All right. So here we go. I am going to wet my large brush in my water, touch it to my paper towel. And I'm going to make more of a smoky blue, so I'm going to take some ultramarine blue, some burnt umber, and some white. And I'm going to mix it over here on the right. Now that's really, really too brown. So I want to keep mixing. And I want to keep, try to keep the paint in a puddle if I can. Because the more I spread it out, the more it's going to dry out on the palette. Okay, so I like that color. Okay, you can add a little more brown if you want it to be a smokier blue. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to start applying it to the outside edges around the snowman. I'm going to take a little bit of white also, and I am just going to start applying it. Now that is pretty dark, which is good for what I want around the snowman. So I'm going to just paint around snowman. And then as I come out from the snowman, I'm going to add some white. Now my brush stroke is really like X's, like X, 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 but they overlap one another. So what I'm going to do is come around the pom-pom and the hat like that. And then I'm going to fill the rest in with that crisscross slip slap motion. Okay, I did get a little bit into the hat, so I'm going to smooth that out. Now, if you want it to look a little bit darker around your snowman like it does here, you can do that by loading more paint just on one end of the brush. And just put it down and bring it around the snowman. I'm going to get some more. And with that corner of my brush loaded, I'm going to put it near the face and pull. Okay, then I'm going to add some white as I bring it out to the edges. Now, my touch is very, very light because what we're doing is we're just going around the edge, and the colors can be a little bit transparent, and a light touch will help them to blend a little bit better. And we're going to do 2 coats, okay, because the first coat is going to look a little bit blotchy, a little bit transparent, and you'll see a lot of brush strokes, and I want to eliminate that. So I'm just going to turn this around and do the other side the same way. I'm going to grab some of that darker blue, the mix, the blue with the brown mix, and I'm going to just put that darker end of the brush near the snowman. I'm just going to pull, get some more paint. I'm going to wipe it off, grab a little white, put some white in there, make it lighter as it goes away from the snowman. And I'm going to continue until I get all around this little guy or girl. Okay. So there's lots of different ways you can approach a project like this. You can use any background color that you'd like. I tend to really like a lot of blues in my winter scenes. But, you know, if you're into purple or teal, you can certainly make adjustments when you're painting to suit yourself and your liking. And especially when you're painting whimsy, anything goes. All right, so let me turn this around. I want to add some more white up in here. You could make the background lighter, but we're going to add snow, and I want the snow to show. So I don't want to make the background too light. I'm coming back in and I'm adding some white, and I'm just lightly blending it. And when I say lightly, what I mean is I'm just using a very, very light touch with my brush, just like a feather stroke. I always use the example, if you were to be dusting like fine figurines made of china, you would use a very, very light touch and a feather duster, and that's what I'm doing when I blend my color. I'm going to come in over here, add a little more white. Actually, with the addition of that white, we won't need another coat. It's dry enough that I can come in and add a little bit. Okay. All right, awesome. So I'm going to rinse that very large brush out in my water. Try to get that brown and blue out of it. So I'm going to use the same brush to paint his face. Okay, now I'm going to turn it upside down. This is an 11 by 14 inch canvas, and so even though I'm fully zoomed out on a vertical, it's hard for you to sometimes see it all in the camera. So I'll be moving it. I can also paint it horizontally at times, and you'll be able to see more. So I'm going to go ahead and paint the white. Now, sometimes people say they can't see it because, you know, you're painting white paint on a white canvas. But if you tip it and you look at it in the light, you'll see a shine where the paint is wet. So that will help you. It'll help you know that you have it covered. And sometimes people ask me if they really truly have to paint it if it's white. And of course you don't have to do anything that you really would rather not, but the canvas could potentially yellow over time, and I think you'll be happier in the long run if you go ahead and you paint it. So I am almost done with that. All right, there we go. So we have his little face base coated, and we're going to leave it there to dry. Leave that to dry, and I'm going to rinse that large brush. Now I'm going to go ahead and paint the hat and the little collar red again, just like the original. And I'm going to just take that red paint, put it on, and just smooth it out as best possible. I'm going to change to the smaller flat brush like this. It's about a 1/2 inch. And I'm just going to paint that in. Now, a lot of the acrylics are a little bit transparent when you're working with them, and that's why we come in and we put in another coat. Now what I'm going to do with this little guy, I'm going to get the red on, but right under the face, I'm not going to put the red right now. So what I'm going to do is just wipe off my brush on my paper towel, and I'm going to grab some of that burnt umber, the dark brown, and I'm going to place that right under the snowman's face, right at the top of his collar. very rich brown color, very, very pretty color. I'm going to tip this. Move this painting. Okay, so I'm going to tip this a little bit. Come in under here. And then I'm just going to run the brush where the brown and the red meet and just kind of blend it in. I'm going to wipe off my brush. And what I want to do is also kind of curve the brush strokes a little bit to help give the collar shape. So here in the middle I'm going to go straight up and down, and then I'm going to curve a little to the left this way and a little to the right that way, and it helps to create some shape. Okay, so that's created a shadow under the snowman's face. Okay, now we're going to go ahead and do the hat in the same manner, and I'm going to turn it upside down for this. Alright, so we're going to do the same thing. I'm going to take the red, and I'm mostly going to go down in the middle of the hat, because at the bottom near the brim I want to lay the brown. We're going to be fluffing a lot of this brim, so we can add actually a little more shading in here than we think we need, because our fluffy hat is going to come up into this brown. Alright, so we're just going to go ahead, get that brown in there. You don't have to be all the way to the line. We're going to be fluffing out beyond that line with our big kid's scruffy pouncer brush. Alright, so that's pretty good there. Creating a shadow behind the brim. So when you have dark behind something lighter, it helps bring the something lighter more forward. Okay, we're creating depth and dimension by having shadows and highlights. Okay, so I'm trying to curve my brush in the shape of that hat. I'm going to flip it back around, and I'm going to show you how we're going to get a highlight in there. I'm going to wipe this brush off, and I'm going to grab the orange now, and I'm going to put the orange up at the top. Now my brush is dirty. All I did was wipe it off a little bit, and I'm coming in with the orange in the brush. It's making it lighter up at the top, and it's helping to give it more shape and make it look rounded. Alright, so let's get some more of that orange. Now my brush is a little dirty, and as I'm brushing the orange on, I'm actually brushing it into the red a little, and that brings some red into my brush too, and a little brown. So there's actually a few colors there mixed together. Now if this gets too streaky for you, you can lay another light coat on after. But this is pretty good. I'm pretty happy with that. I'm going to come in right here and just bring it out a little further. Okay. Grab a little more orange. Now there comes a point when you're painting a canvas where when you're putting the paint on like this, the bottom layer is trying to stick to that canvas and dry. So you don't want to keep rubbing your brush over and over, because you're going to create what I call a bald spot. Okay, you're going to create an area where the paint just doesn't really want to stick. So right in through here, I do want to add some more paint after, but you can see right now it's not a good time to be interrupting that drying process. So always use just a light feather touch whenever you're blending anything. Okay, when it's wet. Alright. So I like that. I'm pretty happy with that. And again, this is a pretty quick beginner's tutorial. Not a lot of detail in this one. This would be great for kids to try. All right, so the face is drying. While that's happening, I'm going to go ahead and add a little bit of shadow under the brim of the hat. So we could either use gray or we could use blue. I'm going to go ahead and use some of that blue mix that I made, and I'm going to add just a little more brown to it. And I'm going to come up in here. So adding brown to that blue makes a great gray color. All right, so just going to lay that in there. Looks pretty messy, right? I'm going to rinse the brush. Touch it on my paper towel. I'm going to grab some white paint. And I'm going to put the white paint under where I just painted. And then I'm going to pull it up into that area that I just painted and soften it. All that is a shadow under the brim. Add a little more white. Blend by running the brush back and forth. All right, and again, just like I told you at the top, some of that fur is going to cover some of that. So if it's not perfect up here in the brim, don't worry about it. I'm just smoothing out. Had a little bit of blue in the brush. You could have a little blue in the face too if you wanted, because he is snow. All right, so the face is drying. While that's happening, I'm going to go ahead and show you how to do the pom-pom and the brim. Here's the finished picture. Again, eliminating the large polka dots, but I'm going to show you how to do the brim and the pom-pom. I'm going to keep it bluish, but you could also use some brown. So I'm going to keep it bluish, but I'm going to add the brown and keep it more of that smoky blue, and it's just going to be our base anyway. You could literally use any color under these that you'd like. Okay? All right. So here I'm going to show you how I'm going to mix some of that color. So I'm going to take some blue, put it in my puddle, take some brown, and I'm going to mix. The brown is pretty strong, so you'll see that it really took over. So you have to get the blue in there and a little bit of white and see what we're dealing with. I actually like that charcoal color. So we're going to go with that. I'm going to pounce in here. Okay. And then I'm going to go right to my brim and my pom-pom. And I'm going to pounce, but I'm going to leave some white showing and leave it very airy. Okay, and not super solid. Tap, 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 tap. Now this brush is older and worn. Those are great. When you have old brushes that have bristles that are sticking out, save them. They might not be good for details, but they'll be good for other techniques. So this is exactly what I want it to look like right now. And I'm turning the brush different ways so I don't get a pattern. I need to dip in my paint more, and when I dip, I just pounce straight up and down. Okay, so I'm extending that white area out on to the outer part of the canvas, and I'm also letting a little of that gray come down onto the snowman's face. That is intentional, because a really big furry broom would have little bits of fur that would stick out all over the place. And I'm going to do the same thing up here in the pom-pom. If you have some of that pom-pom come down onto the hat, that's okay too. This one is actually designed to be up in the back, so I'm not going to leave that on mine. I'm going to clean that up. Now see, the red and orange are not dry, so I just lifted it. But that's okay, I'll touch that up in a little bit. Okay. So now that that's drying, I'm going to get a little bit more blue in my mix and just come in I still want to leave some of that canvas showing in the background like that, okay? Some of that white. I'm going to squirt out some more white. Okay, and I'm going to grab some white, pounce up and down on my palette, and just come in and start adding some white. Now my touch with my brush is very light because the more you mash it down, the more solid that's going to look, and we want it to look airy so we can get dimension like it's furry. I'm also going to show you how to just use a regular brush to finish it, so that whatever tools you might have, hopefully you'll be able to find a brush that will give you this effect. You could also use a sponge and sponge the paint on. Just keep in mind that you want to have a really, really light touch. So I left this a little more gray, but I really like it up against the blue. I'm going to wipe some of that paint off my brush. If I'm not careful and I pounce too much, it's going to start looking very muddy, and that's not what I want. So I have to make sure I don't over pounce. Okay. With these larger brushes, sometimes some of the bristles will stick out a little further than you wanted and make little dots like that. So you can just clean them up with just a little bit of water. Okay. So now what I'm going to do is show you how to finish this. If you don't have one of these pouncy brushes, you can actually use a flat one like this and use it on its side. Okay, I'm going to get one that's not in as good condition as that one. Okay, it's still very good. Alright, so if I take some of this blue and gray mix and I load the brush like this, and then I grab some white and I just bring it down on its corner like that and pounce, I can also get a furry look like that. Okay, so I definitely want to come in with some more white, letting the gray show, but leaving some white a lot more vivid in some areas. So you see how that's adding more dimension? Like this part of the brim looks a little more dimensional than over here because we also have some light. And it's the light against dark that helps to give you more dimension, okay, in your painting. You need lights and darks. So you can see the area that we shaded at the bottom of the hat is getting covered up a lot with the brim. But we do have some darker color still showing. So that's looking good. Again, just be very, very light-handed. You might need to let it dry for a while before you go in and add more white. Leave lots of spaces. And then kind of take a step back and see how you're liking how it looks. I've had a lot of students who look at their picture through their cell phone camera lens, and it really can show you a lot more that way that you're not noticing just with the naked eye. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and build that up. So again, a pouncy brush. Some of you might have a brush called a deerfoot stippler. You could use that. And we'll go over lots of different brushes and uses in another tutorial. Okay, so this is looking really good. We just need to work a little bit more right in through here. Light touch, pouncing straight up and down. Make sure you leave some dark showing too. Okay, and down here on the face, oops, my paper towel has some red and I picked up some red when I dabbed. So right in through here we have a little red, but that's okay. When something like that happens, you know what? I call it the power of whimsy, because anything goes as long as you're happy. So we're going to let a little bit of this down on his face a little. Again, if you have a scruffy brush, I'm going to come in and finish up. I have another one that's just an old fluffy brush. Again, the old fluffy ones you kind of have to earn by painting. You can't really buy them already worn out. Again, a little piece of sponge will work great. Again, when I'm doing the white highlights, I apply the paint a little more heavily, but you do have to make sure that you leave some gray showing. Don't go in and cover up all that nice dark gray that we put in there. Okay, it's going to help give you dimension if you leave it. Tap, tap, tap. Okay, I'm liking that. Super cute. Fuzz it on out if you want. You can go crazy. These hats have really big brims sometimes. Okay, so now you can see the difference between the brim and the pom-pom. So you want to give the pom-pom more depth too, and you can see that we've done that by adding a lot of white. So again, when we go in and we put our white in toward the end, we want more paint on the brush and a lighter touch. Now, I'm not going to fill in the base very much. I want to leave that darker charcoal, and it's going to create an automatic shadow at the bottom of the pom-pom, and we won't have to go in and add it. So one more little touch, I think. Super cute. Again, if you want to, you know what I'll do? I'm going to show you how to just bring the pom-pom down full front, so that if you want to do that, you can. I would have put some gray in there if I would have wanted to do it intentionally, but we can get away with it like this. Maybe round it out just a little bit more. Okay, let's go ahead and get rid of some of that red in there. All right, how's that looking? Pretty cute. All right, so the next thing that we're going to do, we do want to draw a face. Now, I tend to draw eyes that look like teardrops. They tend to make my things look forlorn, sometimes a little bit sad. But, you know, with a big old smile like that, how can anything look sad, right? So the smile is going to finish off the snowman, which, by the way, I'm just going to use a permanent marker for that. So I want to look, and down the center is about where I want to start my carrot. I put it just a little over from center, and then I'm going to do the eyes. Now I start the carrot here with sort of like a curve, like if you were making the front of a letter D, a capital D. And then I'm just going to bring a wiggly line out to the left, and I want the carrot to get skinnier at the tip. Okay, so I did tilt this one a little bit, so I'm going to consider this to be the center, and I want the nose to come way down almost to the middle of where this plate stops and starts. So right around here, I'm going to draw a carrot very, very lightly. You know, some carrots are very bumpy, right? And some are smoother. Alright, so we'll see if we like that in a moment. Again, mine is tipped a little bit, so I'm going to make one eye over here, and I'm going to draw it maybe a little smaller than I really want it. And I'm going to put the other eye over here. And actually, I want to make this one a little bit bigger, a little bit chubbier. Okay, and then the smile we'll put in here after. Again, he's got his head tipped a little bit. Alright, so we want to add some cheeks. And again, I'm just going to use that big old scruffy brush. But if you had a sponge, you could use that. And I need one that doesn't have gray in it. So I have an extra clean one. And I'm going to take some of this red, pounce, 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 some of the orange, pounce, 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 and then I'm going to grab some white. And I'm just going to pounce up and down, maybe add a little more orange, and then I'm going to pounce it on my paper towel. I want a color that I like for the cheeks. So that's kind of a nice color. What I'm going to do is come in here and just tap straight up and down very lightly with that color on my brush. And I want to create a big old cheek, big old rosy cheeks. He's out in the cold. His cheeks are nice and rosy. And then over here, same thing. I'm not going to go into the carrot intentionally, but you might need to a little bit to give you an idea of where you're going to put that cheek. Now, something else I want to do is move this carrot over. I want it more in the middle of the eyes. And get the shavings off. Okay. And I'm going to round it. Carrots are usually kind of rounded at the base, right? Okay. Now, while that's kind of wet, I'm going to just dip in some white. I'm going to take most of this paint off my brush first by pouncing it on my paper towel. Then I'm going to go in. I'm going to need a little more clean white. And put it in a clean spot. I'm a messy painter, so sometimes you'll see my palette and my paper towel and everything that's just covered, and my hands usually. So I'm going to tap in my white. Tap up and down and come back in and add some white. And that's how you're going to soften your cheeks. We don't really want them to look like red blotches. We want it to be soft. Okay, so that one is in closer to the middle, so we'll do the same here. Okay, pretty cute. A little more white. So I keep cleaning the red off the brush and just trying to add more white and get a soft fluffing out. Alright, so I'm going to put that brush in my water basin and I'm going to paint the carrot. So I'm going to use this smaller flat brush. And I'm going to take the orange and I'm going to paint this carrot. My brush is nice and has a nice edge there, so at the end I'm just going to hold the brush sideways, and then as I get down to the bigger end of the nose I can then use the width of the brush to go in and paint. So I'm going to stay right on that pencil line. I want to cover it except for that little area that I need to erase. So if you want to be able to erase your pencil, you can't put paint over it. And if you want to cover it, then you paint right up to it. So I'll show you right here. I'm just going to paint right up to that line. So you notice I stayed just on the top half of that carrot. I'm going to flip this upside down. And I'm going to grab a little bit of that burnt umber on my brush. I'm going to place it at the bottom of the carrot. And a little bit more. Hold the brush the skinny way. Okay, and then I'm going to wipe most of that off my brush, and I'm going to come in and just pull a little bit of that color up. Now we're going to have to wait for it to set up a little bit before we mess too much with it. But I've blended it up onto the orange, and then I'm going to add more orange, okay? But I want to let this dry first. Okay. I'm going to put some more orange. It actually looked dry enough, so I'm just going to more there. All right. Let's go ahead and take our round brush now. We're going to paint these eyes black. Now you could put colors in the eyes also, but I choose to just make them black. And I'm going to turn it upside down to work on the bottom part of the eyes. I find it easier to come in sort of below the point of the brush in a way, rather than to try to turn my hand around. I'm going to turn the painting around. Oh, he's cute. And we're just going to go ahead and place the brush and try to get a nice swoop there. Okay. If you go out of the lines, don't worry, just take your time. And see, this is why I start with the eyes just a little smaller than I really might want them, because as you make adjustments to the little slip of the brush, they tend to grow and get bigger. Alright, so we're going to get a little more black, get this eye done. And again, this is, I believe this is a number 6 round, but every brush company has a different numbering system, it seems, for the rounds. So you can see what size this is and go from there. Alright. Okay, so that's pretty cute. I have one eye. This eye is a little bigger than that one. So I'm going to come in and make this eye just a little bit wider out on the outside. Turn it upside down. I mean, everyone's different, but I find it's much easier to be turning my canvas all around as I do this. All right, so there we go. Super cute. Oh my goodness, he's so cute. So I want to give some eyelashes. And so I'm going to rinse this brush. And actually I'm going to take a smaller brush. This is a number 2 Golden Taklon round brush. It's in nice condition. I'm going to show you how I prepare my brush for making small lines. I take my brush, I dip it in the water, I put the water near the puddle of paint, pull the paint into that puddle, and create a thinner consistency paint. Okay, I want it to flow, but there's a fine line between it flowing and it being too watery. So it takes a little practice sometimes. Another thing, sometimes a little droplet of water will stay on the ferrule, the metal part of your brush. You want to take that off because if it drips down while you're painting, your paint is going to just bleed out all over the place. Okay, so I'm going to put the brush here. I'm going to just stick it out a little bit, pull it down and out. Now as I come out, I lift up the pressure on the brush to make that eyelash. So I'm going to get some more of that paint. Same thing on this side. I'm going to extend the brush out beyond the eye a little bit, come down. That creates a little bit of a lid. I'm going to come down and, okay, there's not enough water in my brush, in my paint. That's why it didn't flow there. So we're just going to go ahead and we're going to pull, pull, pull. And honestly, the slower I try to go to show you, the harder it is to create the stroke. So we're going to leave it like that. This one looks like it really needs another one, so I'm going to come down and I'm just going to do a bigger one. Okay. Okay, as I take a look at my pom-pom, if I had intentionally made a full pom-pom like that instead of one that's like just behind the hat, I would have put some gray down in there, but because it was an afterthought while I was showing you, I didn't. So I want to add a little more white there to cover some of that red. So I'm just grabbing another brush, see if I can put more white in there without it becoming too white. So one of the things that you're going to notice, all this white that you put in the brim and the pom-pom, as it dries, it kind of gets sucked into the paint. You know, it kind of disappears in there. So you might want to keep continuing to add more white. So you see what I did there? If I want to come in and add a little more white, again, it's going to be more paint, lighter touch. Just come in and add some more. You might want to do it again and again as this project dries. As long as you leave some dark areas too, you're going to have the dimension that you want. You could also use dimensional paints up in this brim. That would look really cute. Sky's the limit. Alright, that's super cute. Now, the eyes, I'm going to put that brush in the water. The eyes need a little bit of a highlight, so I'm going to take that pointed brush and I'm just going to dip in a little bit of white. You could use a pencil tip if you wanted for this. You would just dip the tip of your pencil in the white and use that, and then you just wipe it off. Okay, so here we go. I'm just going to put 1 dot, 2 dots, and then over here, 1 dot, 2 dots. So when you're putting highlights in, you either want them all to the left or all to the right. Otherwise, they might come out looking like their eyes are not looking where you want them to, okay? All right, super cute. I'm liking that. I don't recommend erasing until you know your paint is dry. Okay. All right, so really cute, but I want to add a little bit more orange. So I'm going to use just a round brush for now. And I'm going to add more orange to the top of that carrot. Get it nice and bright. And even bring it down into the brown. Alright, and while that's drying, I'm going to take this same brush, wipe it a little bit, and I'm going to get some white. Okay, I'm going to just mix on my palette that little bit of orange that was still in the brush and some white, and I'm going to come in and I'm going to make curved lines on the carrot. I'm going to zoom that in and move this little guy over. All right. And I'm just going to go in and add some curved lines there. So we're curving in the shape of the carrot, and we're just making that highlight up toward the top. So that orange that I just reapplied is still wet, and so it's blending in with some of that white, and so it's not stark white. I just want it to be a little bit lighter. Okay. As it dries, it will fade into the background color a little bit, okay? So I'm going to make some of these a little longer, some a little shorter. Okay, super cute. All right, we're almost done. I'm going to take a little bit more of that burnt umber, and I'm going to put it here also. Just kind of blend out into the carrot a little bit. There. Okay. I'm going to do the smile next, and then the little snowflakes around the edges. Again, I choose not to put polka dots on this one, but you can embellish it however you'd like. So I'm going to get a Sharpie. I like Sharpies because in my experience, once they're good and dry, they don't run when I varnish. So I want his smile to maybe be a little bit tipped too. So I'm going to let it come in from this cheek up into this cheek, and it'll be higher on the right. So here goes nothing. Ready? We're going to put it here in the cheek, and we're going to go up there. And then I'm going to do a little half circle. Okay. So that's pretty cute. You can also draw it with a pencil first if you want. You know, whatever makes you feel more comfortable. You can also paint it with a brush. But the markers are easier for people, especially for children. So let's go ahead and do a couple of little snowflakes. So I'm going to use this brush because it does have a really nice point, but you could also use a much finer brush for this. So I still have some clean white down here on my palette. So I'm going to take some water and I'm going to put it here on the palette. Then I'm going to take the paint, bring it into the water. So what I'm doing is I'm mixing up a paint that's thinner than how it comes out of the tube. So it's more like an ink or the consistency of skim milk. Now you still have to be careful that you don't have too much water, so you might want to touch there. Also watch for any water that might be on the metal, the ferrule, and take that off. Okay, so now this is nice. Looks like a nice consistency. So I'm going to create a snowflake up in this corner, and I'm going, looks like something dripped there, but anyway, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to make an X. 1, 2, and then one down the middle that's longer. I'm reloading the brush, and one across the middle that's longer. Okay. So I'm going to zoom back out for you so you can see more of this design. Alright, so it's pretty soft. It will show soft on the camera, but all I want is just a little subtle snowflake here and there. So I'm going to make an X, and then I do a horizontal and a vertical line that are a little bit longer than the X. And just put them here and there wherever you want. I don't want these to be, for me, I don't want them to be super big or to really kind of take over the painting. I just want them to be a subtle little snowflake out there. We're going to also splatter this. And that's going to add a lot to it. Okay. more X's with a cross through. Okay, that's all I'm going to do. I have noticed though that up and through here I didn't get enough paint up here in this upper corner. So what I'm going to do is just go back and get that really big brush out, wet it. I'm going to grab some of that ultramarine blue that's still sitting on the palette. And I'm going to have to add a little white to it. There. Grab some white. Okay, so when you're done, if you see little areas like that that you want to come in and touch up, you can do that. That's what's great about acrylic. You can just keep going and add. So much fun. Okay, this initial snowflake is a little bit light. I thought it might be when I painted it. So I'm going to come in and I'm going to make that just a little bit bolder. You could do all of this with dimensional paint writers also. You know, there's Scribbles and I think Tulip. I'm not sure if all those companies are still making those products, but they're a lot of fun and readily available usually just about anywhere. Okay, so for snowflakes, you can either put dots or you can come in and put like a little triangle shape, too much water, a little triangle shape at the end of each. What do we want to call it on a snowflake? An arm? I can't think of what we would call it. Okay, so here we go. Just going to add a little triangle at the end of each one. It's a little wet there. Okay. The other thing you can do, let's just use the pencil. You can use the end of a brush or you can use a pencil for polka dots. Let's see what small brush I have handy. Okay, I have a brush that has a pretty small point. So I'm going to dip it in white and I'm going to just go ahead and put it in the center of the snowflake. And you know, I think I'll put one on the end of each one of these little triangles that we made. They're triangles, but they don't have a bottom. An arrow, more like an arrow. So we can come in like this and just add. Okay, now you could do that on all these little ones, or you could leave them as is. Totally up to you. I'm going to come in and put another one on the cross pieces, another polka dot. All right. Okay, so one of the other things that I want to do before we finish up is splatter it. Now you can use a toothbrush for that, or there's different ways you can do it. I like to use a round brush that actually has a lot of has had a lot of use, and it might be a little fluffier. And I wet it in the clean water. And just like I showed you when we did the liner brush, I'm going to put the water on the plate, grab some paint, put it in the water, and then I'm going to test it by tapping. Okay, if the paint doesn't come off, you don't have enough water. That's a little too much. So I always test it to see how big the dots are before I go to my piece. And then my favorite way is to just hold the brush horizontally like this, and with my other hand just come in and tap with 2 fingers. Okay, so you see how the snow is falling. I really love snow, so I like to put a lot. Totally up to you. Now, you want to make sure that your base coat colors are dry before you splatter, because I'll show you why. Like in his eyes, I don't want that many dots. I need to reload. So I need to make more watered down paint. So you want to do this somewhere where, kids, if you're doing this, you want to ask your parents where you should be doing your splattering, because acrylic paint is permanent. And you sure don't want to get it on your furniture or your curtains or anything. Okay, so I got that everywhere. Now I don't want it all over the eyes like that. So with a clean brush, I'm just going to take it away. And that's why you want your base color to be dry, because if it was wet, we would be smudging the black everywhere. So I want to leave the original dots that I put in the eyes, and I want to take away some of the others. A couple of snowflakes in the eyes wouldn't bother me, but I want the highlights to look like highlights. So there we go. The very last thing that you might want to do is sign it once it's dry. You could use a Sharpie or a small brush to sign it. Okay. You also might want to paint your edges. So what I recommend is you let this dry good, like overnight, and then you can brush varnish with whatever water-based varnish that you like from your craft store. It could be matte, satin, or gloss. And then once that's done, you could paint your edges black like I did on this one. Or you could paint all the blue around the edge instead while you're painting the front. So if you want it to be blue, just paint it at the same time that you're painting your actual painting. So here he is with the big polka dots, which I opted not to do this next time. I kind of like the way the snow shows up a little better without them. Alright, well that's it for today. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial. Stay tuned for another tutorial real soon. Thank you and have a wonderful day.